Joining me now to talk about it all is Republican Senator Kevin Cramer of North Dakota, who serves on the Armed Services and Budget Committees, among others. Senator Cramer, it's great to have you back on the show. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Hallie. It's good to be with you. Thank you.
You had been one of the voices, I was with you on Meet the Press on Sunday, calling for this transition to begin. It now has. The president is acknowledging that in a tweet, although he is not conceding. Do you see the president's tweet as the closest he's going to get to that? And do you think he needs to go further?
Well, first of all, I don't think he needs to go further, and I don't know whether it's the closest he'll get to it. I would think at some point, whether he concedes or doesn't concede, whether anybody acknowledges it, at the end of the day, there will be a certification in every state. There will be a confirmation process or a swearing-in process on January 20th of one of the two gentlemen, and that's why I think the transition process is appropriate. You know, some people might view it as preparing for the worst while hoping for the best, but I think it was an appropriate move, and I'm grateful to both him and to the GSA administrator for going forward with the transition.
You said one of the two gentlemen will get sworn in. It's going to be President-elect Biden. Do you acknowledge, or do you hesitate to acknowledge, that Biden has won the presidency?
Well, as I've said many times, I think that's likely. I mean, you'd always rather be the person ahead when you're facing the headwinds of legal challenges. And regardless of how meritorious they may or may not be, there is a process. It's not a bad process. It's a good process that was given to us by our founders and lawmakers ever since, by our Constitution and by our laws. And he's exercising all of those, and I think he ought to. I will say one thing right up front that bothered me a little bit about some of Peter's reporting from the White House. He said that the reason 79% of President Trump's supporters want to continue this is because the president peppers them. And I think that's disrespectful to the people for whom he's the representative. He reflects them. It's not so much the other way around. And so we need to restore trust in the system, but trust in itself is not the goal.
How can you say that, though, Senator?
How can I say what?
I do wonder about that, and I do wonder about your view of the long-term impact on this. The president is spreading widespread conspiracy theories about fraud that does not exist. That, I imagine, is sowing distrust. We're seeing it in the numbers already, and I do think it's from the president. These are people, his millions of followers, his millions of supporters who are listening to him. Does the president not have an incumbency, an onus on him to tell the truth and to say the facts as they exist as a leader in this country, and don't you?
Well, first of all, Hallie, we haven't seen all of the evidence, and that is part of the problem, that we haven't seen that evidence that they claim that they have. We do need to see that, but he also needs to do it in a way that presents his legal case in the best form, and that's not always on national television. Now, that said, I acknowledge it increasingly looks like it's going to be a President Biden, but whether I say it or I don't say it, whether Donald Trump says it or doesn't say it, that's not really the issue. The issue in my mind is we can't just let trust of the system be the goal. The goal has to be something worthy of the people's trust. And for the last 4 years, we've been dealing with a Democratic Party and a lot of national media that have sown a lot of distrust in the last election and the legitimacy of this president. We've got to heal that. I don't think we heal that overnight. I think we have to let this legal system play out. That's the only thing in my mind that will ever satisfy not just President Trump, but the millions of people who support him and want him to fight.
I wanted to ask what you're waiting for here, Senator. You seem to have made that clear for these legal fights to play out, but I have to take some exception. These legal fights aren't playing out in the media court of public opinion, right? They're playing out in actual courts, and judges are dismissing by a large margin these cases. Some 2/3 of these cases that have been brought by the president or his Republican allies, as you know, have basically been denied, dismissed, settled, withdrawn. There has been no evidence, no proof, no anything of the kind of widespread fraud that the president, even as we were coming on the air, Senator, is still talking about and still pushing. What are you waiting for to stand up and say, this isn't true, this is not okay, we need to move on?
Sure. I think one of the things that has to happen, Hallie, is that the president's legal team themselves have to bring the cases on the part of the president. Many of the cases you're talking about, you referred to as allies, and they are allies, and in some cases their interests are aligned, but they're not his cases. A lot of them have been thrown out because of lack of standing. But the evidentiary.
Well, the ones that are, let me just interrupt you here, because the Pennsylvania one was the president's case, and that just got dismissed by a federal judge because, as he called it, it's a Frankenstein's monster of bad arguments, and the appeal was riddled with errors as it moves forward, very unlikely to make it to the next level.
Well, and a great point, because that's the one where the president did bring it. The judge did rule against them, but it also opens the door for the appropriate appeal. And that appeal, whether it's successful or not successful, I think is important to restoring confidence one way or the other. And that's why I say I think people ought to relax, let it play out. The resiliency of our republic survived Jimmy Carter, Barack Obama. It's going to survive Donald Trump and maybe a Joe Biden, because it still comes back to the fact that we're a self-governed nation, and that's who we have to remember all. I mean, the Republican Party in the future is going to be interesting just to see how that plays out. I hope someday after all of this, either 4 years from now or 4 months from now, we're going to have a discussion about that, because I think it's fascinating the role that Donald Trump has played in our party and reshaping it.
I'm with you. I think that is an interesting conversation to have. It's one we'll have on this show. I have to ask, at what point, Senator, do you feel like you are then continuing to spread this misinformation and deny the reality of what's in front of us? Are you waiting for that December 8th safe harbor deadline? What is the holdup here in acknowledging this? And I have to wonder, is some of it because you're concerned about angering President Trump, who, as I know, you are close with?
I like him a lot. I'm grateful that he's the president. I wish and I hope he can be president for 4 more years, Hallie. But I want to just throw this back a little bit, because we have a whole bunch of wild rhetoric that are fanning the flames of discontent coming from especially your network. I mean, Chuck Todd's monologue on Sunday was full of
respectfully, Senator, I disagree with that respectfully, Senator, because I think the question that I don't mean to press this point, because I actually have other questions to get to you on, and we're almost out of time here. It's the point that I want to get to you on. If the president continues to invalidate this election moving forward, which he has sought to do, he has sought to just factually, on an objective basis, raise questions about the legitimacy of the election that are unproven, unfounded, and dangerous to this democracy. That is just an objective statement here. What's to say then that the distrust that he's sowing is not going to affect, for example, your reelection, your victory moving forward? How do you expect voters to believe that you've won if they don't believe Joe Biden's winning now based on what the president's saying?
Well, let me tell you what Republican voters aren't doing. They're not smashing windows. They're not burning cars. They're not beating up Democrats coming out of Joe Biden events.
Well, this is taken us in a very different direction, Senator, because that's not happening based on the results of this election. The question I'm trying to get to is the dangerous rhetoric related to the undermining of this democracy that you have sworn an oath to uphold.
Right. And I will uphold it, and I do uphold it, and I am upholding it. And part of it is this wonderful self-governed nation of ours that has 3 co-equal branches, and one of them being the judiciary. Let them play out their role. Look, I'm not prone to panic in any circumstance, as you maybe could tell. But anyway, I wonder if you guys ever questioned the legitimacy of the Mueller investigation that had no evidence, or the impeachment that had no evidence.
Well, I think this is a left-hand turn here. Senator, I appreciate that you want to move on away from the question I posed to you. I think it's clear that you've made your point clear and have not acknowledged, of course, the incoming president-elect. But I have to ask you, you are going to end up in a position to confirm or not confirm his cabinet members. He is announcing his cabinet members. You sit on the Armed Services Committee. There is reporting now that the incoming defense secretary is likely to be Michelle Flournoy. Obviously, she would be an historic pick there. Is she somebody that you are open to confirming when President-elect Biden gets sworn in and he starts to put in place his cabinet members if she's the one?
First of all, Hallie, I don't have any defaults to no on cabinet members or to yes. I'm always open to hearing them out. I try not to prejudge. I don't know her that well. I'm open to all of them. But I would also then remind you that there were 6 Trump cabinet nominees who got 0 Democratic votes in the United States Senate. If we go that route, it's going to be very difficult for Joe Biden to have anybody on his cabinet. So, yes, I want to be and remain open-minded. And by the way, I do believe that the president has a right to make these nominations. So the standard for even approving them shouldn't be what it was in the last 4 years.
Thank you for checking out our YouTube channel. Why don't you subscribe? It's really easy. Just click on that button down there. And for more news from MSNBC, click on any of these videos here for the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more videos from MSNBC with our newsletters. Head over to msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up.